On June 19th, 2020, Evan DeSimone tweeted, "Every time we're forced to talk about Joe Rogan, I am reminded of my best and most immutable axiom. Nothing that only men like is cool." Adding the next day, "Everyone is mad about this, so let me just clarify that I am 100% correct." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show where we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. Evan's axiom here, I think, even if you maybe can think of one or two counterexamples, it is something that is just, correct on a spiritual level. Yeah, if there's a thing and you imagine the fan base for that thing, and it's 99.9% dudes, it's probably lame. I also think you could apply it to other majority groups. I think you also could say that something that only white people like is probably not cool. I think the reason this is the case is because if you make a product that just appeals to the lowest common denominator in our society the way it is, it's going to be a product that just appeals to men. That any product that is interesting and cool and has complexity to it will have a somewhat diverse fan base. That even things that are traditionally considered boy things will have female fans if they're interesting and complex. And I think that this really applies to Joe Rogan because, I don't know if I've ever met a woman who likes Joe Rogan, who is not, on the payroll of, a right-wing website. Now, I will say, Evan DeSimone did definitely get to in his own mentions about this tweet. He kept replying to his own tweet and responding to people who were mad at him, which I get the temptation to do, but is generally poor form. Although I did like his joke of, "Please stop telling me your girlfriend likes Joe Rogan, your girlfriend isn't real." And I'm sure, yes, it is possible to find women who like Joe Rogan, but once again, I think that on a, spiritual level, the point is true. Now, some people did quote this tweet with counterexamples. Sean Patrick McCarthy said wrong and then posted the cover for the book The Forgotten Soldier. I can't say I'm familiar with the fan bases of World War II memoirs, but I'm sure there's truth to this. Jonathan O'Brien did make a good point of apart from Steely Dan, of course. And Doug says, "I want to agree with this, but yet the Wu-Tang Clan." And this is the one that definitely does give me pause, because I can't in good conscience say that the Wu-Tang Clan isn't a 99.9% male fan base, but the Wu-Tang Clan is cool. I'll just say it's the exception that proves the rule and keep it moving. And the thing about this tweet is, it comes up anytime there's discourse about Joe Rogan, and there's discourse about Joe Rogan a lot. When I first saw this tweet, again, for the first time in a while, I was shocked to see that it was from 2020, because I felt like it would have been from 2024, when there was the peak Joe Rogan discourse, the peak, should Kamala have gone on Joe Rogan? But yeah, this tweet came up when that happened. Anytime there's Joe Rogan discourse, this tweet gets brought up. And look, I don't listen to the Joe Rogan Experience enough to give a thoughtful breakdown as to why it's not cool and or why women aren't fans of Joe Rogan. If I was the curator of the Museum of Podcasts, I might make some effort to listen to some Joe Rogan and make some objective observations, but I'm not that. I just know that anytime a clip of him comes across my feed, I'm always yeah, this makes sense. It makes sense that the exact people I know who like Joe Rogan like him. A big mistake I once made is in 2019, I was in an Uber ride home, and I mentioned, because I was a little drunk and I'm an oversharer, that I was doing a podcast, and the driver of the car asked me if I was a fan of Joe Rogan, and because for some reason I feel a compulsion never to lie, I said no. And then he tried to sell me on it for 5 minutes, and I couldn't just agree to disagree, and it was awkward, and I shouldn't have said anything. And every single time I see a clip from the Joe Rogan Experience, I'm yeah, it makes sense that the guy who was driving that Uber is a fan of him. Anyway, the way I find this tweet most interesting is when it's applied to other things. Liz on Blue Sky said that Elon Musk is another perfect example of nothing that only men like is cool. Similarly, when Zoe Schiffer wrote an article about Cybertruck owners, and they were talking about how women don't like Cybertrucks, Hare said, I forgot who said that nothing that only men like is cool, but man, is it true? A funny time this was brought up in 2020 itself is when CNN did a poll for Trump and Biden in the 2020 election, and men were pro-Trump and women were pro-Biden. Mark Pressler just said nothing that only men like is cool. And the time I saw it most recently come up on one of my feeds was on Blue Sky, when the Pastor Solomon was tweeting about the Poly Market bar and how there were only men there. He said, "A complete sausage fest," to which Jessica H responded with, "One of my favorite tweets remains true," and then posted the tweet from Evan. And I think the way not to take this tweet is the way that this screenshot I got from Reddit does. I actually don't know where this is from because the context is in Cyrillic, but it says, "Imagine feeling a need to double check every interest you have for female approval." And the fact that that's someone's takeaway just shows that they don't get it. I'm trying to put this in a way that won't just be mean to the people I'm talking about, but whatever. The point, I think, is that you shouldn't have to check whether or not something you like has female fans. It's that, if you are an evolved person who has good thoughts and tastes, you'll never even accidentally like a thing that women don't like. I think of the causation backwards. The Joe Rogan Experience isn't lame because women don't like it. Women don't like it because it's lame. I generally try to avoid my conclusions being sucks to suck, but if you find yourself liking things that women don't like, you have bad taste. Sorry, this one was a little bit meandering because I kind of wavered back and forth how much I cared about offending people who are fans of Joe Rogan, and so I kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit, but then I just said what I meant. Follow me for new tweet every day, and if you like the show, please go to patreon.com/museum of Twitter. We get a weekly bonus episode called Museum of Not Twitter, and you get a vote on my cover on Subscriber Sundays.